The Montana sky stretched endless and blue as I drove through the ranch gates for the first time in 15 years. Dust kicked up behind my rental truck, coating everything in that familiar, gritty film I'd spent half my life trying to wash away. The main house looked smaller than I remembered, paint peeling from the shutters, porch sagging slightly on the left side. Dad would have hated seeing it like this. But Dad was gone now, buried 6 months ago while I was closing deals in Singapore. I'd missed the funeral, missed everything, really. My brother Jake had handled all of it alone, just like he'd handled the ranch alone for the past decade and a half. The guilt sat heavy in my chest as I parked near the barn. Jake stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face weathered beyond his 40 years. We looked at each other for a long moment before he nodded once. Michael. His voice was rough, unused to visitors. Jake. I grabbed my bag, suddenly feeling like a stranger on land that bore my family name. We walked toward the house in silence, boots crunching on gravel. The cattle lowed in the distance, a sound that once meant home. Now it just reminded me how far I'd run. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered, yet somehow completely different. Mum's curtains still hung in the kitchen, but they were faded now, thin with age. Photos lined the mantel, frozen moments of a family that no longer existed. Jake poured us both coffee without asking, the ritual automatic. "There's something you need to see," he said finally, sliding an envelope across the scarred wooden table. My name was written on it in Dad's distinctive scrawl. He left instructions, said you'd come back eventually, that I should give this to you when you did. I stared at the envelope like it might bite. Dad and I hadn't spoken in 3 years before his death, not since the argument that sent me overseas for good. Or what I thought was for good. "What's in it?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Jake shrugged, but his eyes held something I couldn't read. Never opened it. That was his wish. But Michael, whatever's in there, it changed everything for him those last months. He talked about you constantly, kept saying he needed to make things right. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the envelope. The paper was yellowed, worn at the edges like Dad had handled it often. I could picture him sitting at this same table, pen in hand, writing words he couldn't speak aloud. That was always his way, bottling everything up until it poisoned him from the inside. I broke the seal carefully, almost reverently. The letter inside was 3 pages, front and back, Dad's handwriting growing shakier toward the end. I began to read, and with each line, the foundation of everything I thought I knew began to crack. "Son," it started, "if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're home. That's all I ever wanted, even if I had a damn poor way of showing it." The words blurred as my eyes filled. I blinked hard, forced myself to continue. What came next would haunt me for the rest of my life. The fight we had, the things I said about you abandoning the ranch, abandoning family. I need you to understand why I was so angry. It wasn't about you leaving. It was about you not knowing the truth, and me being too much of a coward to tell you. My throat tightened. Jake watched me carefully, probably seeing the color drain from my face. "What truth?" I whispered to the letter, but Dad's words were already answering. "This ranch isn't mine, Michael. Never was. It belongs to you and Jake, bought and paid for with money your mother inherited from her father. When we married, I was a broke cowhand with nothing but pride and a good horse. Your grandfather never thought I was good enough for his daughter, and he was probably right, but she loved me anyway. God knows why." I looked up at Jake. "Did you know this?" He shook his head slowly. "Keep reading." I did, and each revelation was a stone in my gut. Dad explained how Grandpa had left everything to Mom with one condition. If she married Dad, the ranch would go to her children, not her husband. Dad would manage it, work it, but never truly own it. "I spent 40 years building something that wasn't mine," the letter continued. Every fence post, every head of cattle, every improvement, I was just a caretaker. And it ate at me, Michael. Ate at my pride, my sense of worth. When you started talking about leaving, going to college, making something of yourself in the city, it felt like you were spitting on everything I'd sacrificed. But that was my wound, not yours. You had every right to choose your own path. I just couldn't see it through my own bitterness. Tears rolled down my cheeks freely now, all those years of anger, of thinking he didn't respect my choices, didn't love me enough. "There's more," Jake said quietly. Rehook. I thought the worst revelation was behind me. I was so wrong. The next paragraph would explain why my brother stayed, why he never left, and why he'd been carrying a burden that should have been mine. I forced my eyes back to the page, dreading what came next. "The reason I'm telling you this now," Dad's letter continued, "is because Jake knows, has known for 5 years. He found the original will when Mum got sick, saw the stipulations, understood the whole ugly truth. And you know what he did? He stayed anyway. Turned down a full scholarship to veterinary school, gave up his own dreams because he saw how it was breaking me that neither of my sons wanted the ranch." My head snapped up to Jake. "You had a scholarship?" His jaw clenched, eyes fixed on his coffee mug. "University of Montana, full ride, would have started the same year you left for Stanford." "Jesus, Jake, why didn't you read the rest?" he interrupted, voice tight. Dad's words cut deeper with every sentence. "I didn't ask him to stay, but I didn't stop him either. That's my greatest sin, Michael. I let your brother sacrifice his future because I was too proud to admit this place wasn't even mine. And when you wanted to leave, I exploded because you were doing what Jake should have done, what I should have encouraged. You were brave enough to choose yourself, and I hated you for it because it highlighted my own cowardice." The handwriting grew more erratic, emotion bleeding through the ink. By the time I realized what I'd done, how I'd trapped Jake and driven you away, your mother was dying. She made me promise to fix things, to tell you both the truth. But I was afraid. Afraid you'd hate me, afraid Jake would leave if he knew I understood his sacrifice. So I waited, kept putting it off, and then she was gone, and I'd lost my chance. I wiped my face roughly, unable to look at my brother. How many times had I called him from overseas, bragging about promotions and deals, while he fed cattle and fixed fences on land that was legally mine? "I'm writing this on what I think might be my last good day," the letter continued. Dad's acceptance of his mortality, stark and painful. The cancer's moving fast, and there's things that need saying while I still can. First, Jake, if you're reading this over Michael's shoulder like I know you are, you stubborn bastard, listen close. You don't owe me anything more. You gave me 5 years you can't get back, and that's 5 years too many. Sell the ranch if you want, go back to school, do whatever brings you peace. You've earned that right 10 times over. I glanced at Jake. His eyes were red, jaw working like he was trying to swallow something sharp. Second, Michael, I need you to understand something. I was wrong about almost everything, but I was right about one thing. This land matters. Not because of property or legacy or any of that horse shit I used to spout. It matters because it's a place where things grow, where work has meaning, where a man can be part of something bigger than himself. I don't expect you to come back. You've built a good life, and I'm proud of you even if I never said it. But if you do come back for the right reasons, not for me, not for guilt. Come back because you want to. The words hit like physical blows. I'd spent 15 years proving I didn't need the ranch, didn't need Montana, didn't need any of it. And here was Dad, from beyond the grave, giving me permission to want it anyway. The truth is, the letter went on, I loved this land so much it made me cruel. I loved it more than I loved being fair to you boys, and that's unforgivable. But maybe, if you're both reading this together, you can figure out what it should have been all along. Not a prison, not a burden, but a choice. The final page was shorter, Dad's handwriting barely legible. I'm tired now, and the words don't come as easy. But I need to say this. I love you both. I failed you both in different ways, but I love you with everything I had. Michael, you were right to leave. Jake, you were wrong to stay for my sake, and I was wrong about all of it. The ranch papers are in my desk, bottom drawer. You'll see the trust documents, see how everything was set up. It's yours together, always was. What you do with it now is up to you. Just promise me one thing. Whatever you decide, decide it together. I kept too many secrets, and it poisoned everything. Don't make my mistakes. Talk to each other, listen to each other. Be the brothers you were before I got in the way. It was signed simply, Dad. I set the letter down with shaking hands. The silence in the kitchen was absolute, broken only by the old clock ticking on the wall. Jake finally spoke, voice rough with emotion. I don't blame you for leaving. You should, I said. If I'd known, you couldn't have known. That was his point. Jake rubbed his face tiredly. I've had 5 years to process this, Michael. 5 years of being angry, then understanding, then just being tired. When he got sick, when I saw how it was eating him up, I couldn't stay angry anymore. He was just a man, flawed and proud and hurt by his own father's judgment. He did the best he could with tools he didn't have. I looked around the kitchen, seeing it differently now. Not Dad's domain, but Mom's legacy. A gift from a grandfather who'd tried to protect his daughter's children from a son-in-law's pride. It was messy and complicated and human. What do you want to do? I asked Jake. With the ranch, I mean. Do you want to sell? He was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at land he'd worked for years without truly questioning why. I don't know, he admitted finally. There are days I hate this place, hate what it cost me. But there are also days when I'm out checking the fence line at sunrise and the world's so beautiful it hurts. Those days, I can't imagine being anywhere else. I understood that better than I'd expected. I spent 15 years running from this place, I said slowly, working through thoughts I'd never allowed myself to have. Built a whole life around not being a Montana rancher. But you know what? I've closed million-dollar deals standing in offices 70 floors up, and I've never felt as accomplished as the time Dad and I delivered a breech calf at 3 in the morning. I was 16. Jake smiled slightly. I remember. You came in covered in blood and birth fluid, grinning like you'd won the lottery, because it felt like I had, like I'd done something real, something that mattered. I paused, the next words difficult but necessary. I think I've been afraid that if I admitted I missed this, it would mean Dad was right and I was wrong. But maybe we were both wrong and both right. And it's more complicated than I wanted it to be. That's remarkably mature for you, Jake said dryly, but there was warmth underneath. 15 years of expensive therapy, I shot back, and we both laughed, breaking the tension. It felt good, natural, like sliding into an old comfortable coat. So what now? Jake asked. We can't both run the place. You have a life in Singapore. I have, well, cattle that need feeding tomorrow morning regardless of family drama. I took a deep breath, an idea forming that felt both terrifying and exactly right. What if we tried, really tried, not like before, with one of us sacrificing for the other, but as actual partners? Jake raised an eyebrow. You want to move back? I don't know yet, I admitted, but I could try splitting my time, working remotely when possible, being here for the important stuff. You could take that veterinary degree if you want, even if it's 15 years late. We could hire help, modernize operations, make this work for both of us, instead of consuming one of us. That's a lot of hypotheticals. Yeah, it is. But what's the alternative? You keep carrying this alone while I send money from overseas and feel guilty? We sell and both spend the rest of our lives wondering what if. Dad was right about one thing, Jake. We need to decide this together, not just let inertia or guilt make the choice for us. Jake stood, walked to the window, hands shoved in his pockets. I gave him space, understanding he needed time to process. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted everything gold, the way it only did in Montana. The mountains in the distance stood eternal, indifferent to human drama. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Jake turned back. If we do this, we do it honestly. No more martyrdom, no more unspoken resentments. We talk about the hard stuff, even when it's uncomfortable. Agreed. And you actually show up, not just physically, but mentally. I can't do this with a partner who's half checked out thinking about his next conference call. Fair enough. And you can't do it playing the suffering saint. If you want out, if you want to pursue something else, you say so. No noble sacrifices. Jake extended his hand. Deal. We shook, and something in me settled. It wasn't everything fixed, wasn't all wounds healed, but it was a start, more honest than anything our family had managed in generations. There's a lot of work to be done, Jake said, looking around. Places falling apart. Herd needs culling. Finances are a mess. And that's before we get into the emotional archaeology of unpacking 40 years of family dysfunction. Sounds like we'd better get started, I said, finishing my coffee. Tomorrow, Jake corrected. Tonight I'm taking you to Murphy's. You owe me about 15 years of beer. Over the next several days, Jake and I fell into an unexpected rhythm. I'd forgotten how much I knew about ranch work, muscle memory taking over as we repaired fence lines and sorted cattle. My hands blistered, then calloused, remembering their old shape. In the evenings, we sat on the porch with beers, talking through ideas and memories in equal measure. Some conversations were easy, reminiscing about Mom's terrible singing or the time we'd accidentally flooded the barn. Others cut deeper, excavating years of hurt that Dad's letter had brought to the surface. One night, Jake told me about the scholarship letter, how he'd held it for 3 days before putting it in a drawer unopened. I knew if I read it, really read it, and let myself want it, I'd resent being here, he explained. It seemed easier to just not know, to choose the ranch without seeing what I was giving up. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard, I said. He shrugged. Maybe. But I also met Emma because I stayed. We were married for 4 years before the cancer took her. If I'd gone to Missoula, I never would have known her, never would have had those years. Who's to say which path was right? I hadn't known about Emma, hadn't even known Jake had married. The realization of how much I'd missed, how little I'd stayed connected, hit hard. I'm sorry, I said, for not being here, for not even knowing. I didn't tell you. Didn't want you feeling obligated to come back, turning my life into another reason for your guilt. But I'm telling you now because if we're going to do this, be partners, you need to know who I am. And I'm a man who loved and lost, who chose to stay even when staying hurt, and who's tired of pretending I don't want more than just survival. What do you want? I asked. Jake looked at the darkening sky, considering. I want this place to thrive, not just limp along. I want to practice veterinary medicine, even if it's just for our own herd and neighbors' animals. I want to stop feeling like I'm betraying Dad's memory every time I imagine doing something different. And I want my brother back, the real one, not the guilt-ridden ghost who sends money and rarely calls. His words hit like a punch, true and painful. I want that too, I admitted. I want to figure out if I can be both people, the businessman and the rancher, the guy who closed deals in Tokyo and the kid who knew every cow by name. I want to stop running from who I was because I was afraid it would erase who I became. Then let's figure it out together, Jake said. We spent the following weeks doing exactly that, slowly building a vision for the ranch that honored its past without being imprisoned by it. I made calls to contacts in sustainable agriculture, learning about regenerative ranching practices that could make the operation more profitable and environmentally sound. Jake researched online veterinary programs, finding one that offered a path to licensing for people with ranch experience. We argued sometimes, old patterns of stubbornness emerging when we were tired or frustrated. But we also laughed more than we had in years, rediscovering the brotherhood that had existed before Dad's pain had wedged between us. One morning, I woke before dawn to find Jake already in the barn, delivering a calf from a first-time mother having trouble. I joined him without speaking, falling into the old rhythm of assistance. When the calf finally came, slick and bleating, Jake sat back with a tired grin. "Never gets old," he said. "Never does," I agreed, feeling something click into place. This was real. This mattered. And I'd been an idiot to think success only existed in boardrooms and bank accounts. Later that day, we drove out to Dad's grave for the first time together. The headstone was simple, just his name and dates, next to Mom's more elaborate marker. I knelt, touching the cold granite, finally ready to speak words I should have said years ago. "I forgive you," I told him, "for being human, for being flawed, for loving badly but loving nonetheless. And I'm sorry too for running so far I forgot that you were more than your worst moments." Jake knelt beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "We're going to make this work," he told Dad's grave. "Not the way you planned, maybe, but our way. Together." We stood in silence for a while, two brothers finally on the same side, united by understanding rather than obligation. The Montana wind whistled through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and cattle and home. As we drove back to the ranch, our ranch, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 15 years, peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of purpose. I didn't have all the answers yet. Didn't know exactly how to balance my two lives or what the future held. But I knew I wouldn't face it alone. Dad's letter had shattered everything I thought I knew, but in the breaking, it had created space for something better to grow. A partnership based on truth instead of secrets, on choice instead of obligation, on love that was honest enough to include anger and forgiveness in equal measure. That night, sitting on the porch with Jake, watching the sun set over mountains that had witnessed generations of our family's struggle and survival, I understood what Dad had tried to say in his final words. The land didn't matter because of ownership or legacy. It mattered because it was where we'd learned to be brothers again, where broken things could be mended, where the hard work of healing looked a lot like the hard work of ranching, slow, patient, and necessary. "Thank you for waiting," I told Jake, "for not selling, for not giving up, for being here when I finally came home." He nodded, taking a long pull from his beer. "Thank you for coming back, for reading the letter, for being willing to try." We sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, two men rebuilding something that should have never been broken, finally understanding that home wasn't about who owned what. It was about who stood beside you when the work got hard, who forgave you when you failed, and who believed that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. Dad's letter had given us that. Not answers, but permission to find our own.